Canada is changing its immigration policies. The government has announced a significant shift in its approach to managing the number of new permanent residents entering the country. This move comes as part of a broader strategy to address various socioeconomic challenges and ensure sustainable growth. The country plans to welcome fewer permanent residents in the coming years. This decision marks a departure from previous years where higher immigration targets were set. The government believes that by reducing the number of new arrivals, it can better allocate resources and provide more comprehensive support to those who do settle in Canada. In 2025, Canada will accept 395,000 new permanent residents. This is a slight reduction compared to recent years. The government aims to gradually decrease these numbers to ensure that the country's infrastructure and services can keep pace with the growing population. This number will drop to 380,000 in 2026, reflecting a more cautious approach. The gradual reduction is designed to give local communities time to adjust and integrate new residents more effectively, and 365,000 in 2027. The gradual decrease aims to address various national concerns. These include housing shortages, healthcare capacity, and the availability of social services. This represents a significant decrease from previous years, where the numbers were consistently higher. Historically, Canada has been known for its welcoming stance towards immigrants, but the new policy reflects a shift towards more controlled and sustainable growth. The government says these changes are necessary. Officials argue that the new targets will help manage the country's resources more effectively. They emphasize that the quality of life for both current residents and newcomers is a top priority. Canada needs to balance its economic needs with sustainable population growth. This balance is crucial for long-term prosperity. By carefully managing the number of new permanent residents, the government hopes to create a more stable and prosperous future for all. The government wants to ensure that newcomers have access to housing and essential services. Adequate infrastructure is key to successful integration. This includes not only physical infrastructure like housing, but also social infrastructure such as community support systems. This includes healthcare, education, and social services. By managing immigration numbers, Canada aims to provide a better quality of life for all residents. The ultimate goal is to create a harmonious society where everyone, whether new or established, can thrive. Canada is also making it harder for temporary residents to live and work in the country. The new regulations are aimed at controlling the influx of temporary residents and ensuring that only those who meet stringent criteria can stay. This move is part of a broader strategy to manage population growth and resource allocation more effectively. The government believes that by tightening these rules, they can better support the residents who are already in the country and ensure that the infrastructure and services are not overstretched. International students will face new challenges. These changes are expected to impact thousands of students who come to Canada each year for higher education. The new rules will require students to meet higher academic and financial standards before they can be granted a study permit. This means that students will need to demonstrate not only their academic capabilities, but also their ability to financially support themselves during their stay in Canada. Canada will issue fewer study permits. This reduction is part of a broader strategy to manage the number of international students and ensure that educational institutions are not overwhelmed. By limiting the number of study permits, the government aims to maintain a high standard of education and ensure that resources are adequately distributed among students. This move is also intended to prevent overcrowding in classrooms and ensure that each student receives the attention and support they need to succeed. This means fewer students will be allowed to study in Canada. The government believes this will help maintain the quality of education and resources available to students. By reducing the number of international students, educational institutions can focus on providing a better learning environment and more personalized support to each student. This approach is expected to enhance the overall educational experience and ensure that students can achieve their academic goals. Students will also need to show they have more money to support themselves. This financial requirement is intended to ensure that students can cover their living expenses without relying on external aid. The government wants to make sure that students are financially stable and can focus on their studies without the added stress of financial difficulties. This new requirement will likely mean that students will need to provide more detailed financial documentation and proof of funds when applying for a study permit. The popular Student Direct Stream, or SDS program, is ending. This program had previously expedited the process for students from certain countries, making it easier for them to get study permits. The termination of this program is expected to slow down the application process for many prospective students, making it more challenging for them to secure a study permit in a timely manner. This change is part of the government's effort to standardize the application process and ensure that all students are subject to the same rigorous criteria. This program helped students from certain countries get study permits faster. Its termination will likely slow down the application process for many prospective students. The government believes that by ending the SDS program, they can create a more equitable system where all students, regardless of their country of origin, have to go through the same application process. This change is expected to create a level playing field and ensure that all students are evaluated based on the same criteria. Graduates will also find it harder to stay in Canada after their studies. The new rules will make it more challenging for them to transition from student status to permanent residency. This change is aimed at ensuring that only those graduates who have the skills and qualifications needed in the Canadian job market can stay and work in the country. The government wants to make sure that the transition from student to permanent resident is based on merit and the ability to contribute to the Canadian economy. The rules for post-graduation work permits, or PGWPs, are stricter. Graduates will need to meet higher standards to qualify for these permits, which are essential for gaining work experience in Canada. The new requirements will likely include higher language proficiency standards, more stringent job offer criteria, and possibly even higher educational qualifications. These changes are intended to ensure that only the most qualified graduates can stay and work in Canada, thereby contributing to the country's economic growth and development. Canada is also changing the rules for visitor visas. These changes are part of a comprehensive effort to tighten immigration policies and ensure that only those who meet specific criteria can enter and stay in the country. The new rules will likely include more stringent background checks, higher financial requirements, and possibly even restrictions on the length of stay. The government aims to ensure that visitors to Canada are genuine tourists, or short-term visitors, and that they have the means to support themselves during their stay without relying on public resources. Canada wants to welcome more French-speaking immigrants. The government has set targets for Francophone immigration outside of Quebec. In 2025, Canada aims to welcome 8.5% of its immigrants from French-speaking countries. This target will increase to 9.5% in 2026 and 10% in 2027. Canada has two official languages, English and French. The government wants to support the growth of French-speaking communities outside of Quebec. Increasing Francophone immigration is one way to achieve this goal. These changes to Canada's immigration policies are significant and mark a new direction for the country. The new policies are designed to address both immediate and long-term challenges that Canada faces in terms of population growth and resource management. The government cites several reasons for these changes, aiming to create a more balanced and sustainable future. Among these reasons are economic stability, social cohesion, and the need to adapt to global trends in migration. One reason is the need to address public concerns that have been growing over the past few years. Many Canadians have voiced their worries through public forums and protests, highlighting the urgency of these issues. Some Canadians are worried about the impact of immigration on housing affordability and social services, which are already under strain. The rising cost of living and limited availability of essential services have been major points of contention. The government also wants to ensure that Canada's infrastructure can support newcomers, which includes expanding current facilities. This involves not just building new structures, but also upgrading existing ones to meet modern standards. This includes housing, healthcare, and transportation, all of which are crucial for a growing population. The aim is to create a seamless integration process for newcomers, ensuring they have access to the resources they need. The government believes these changes will help Canada balance its economic needs with the well-being of all residents, ensuring a prosperous future. By fostering a more inclusive and supportive environment, the country hopes to attract skilled workers and entrepreneurs. It is important to stay informed about these changes if you plan to immigrate to Canada, as they could affect your plans and opportunities. Keeping up to date with the latest information will help you navigate the new landscape more effectively.